All right. Yeah. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. It is Tuesday, September 30th, year of our Lord 2025. And I've been thinking a lot about what happened to me. You know what I mean? I was thinking about Neil Shenvi, and he had talked about a while back. The you from 5 years ago wouldn't recognize the you from today, so that's bad. And so you got to realize that that's bad because you've been changing, man. You've been totally changing, and you're radicalized, and you gotta really consider that and prayerfully think about it and all that. So I was starting to feel guilty because I looked back and I have the benefit of I don't write in a journal. Maybe I should start writing in a journal. I don't know. But I have the benefit of being able to look back at my old videos. It's kind of like an online journal, an e-journal, a video blog, vlog. And I can see what I was like back then. And it's true, man. I've changed. Oh, yeah. I've changed. And so I started thinking, Neil seems like a really smart guy. You know what I mean? He's like a theoretical chemist or something. That's really smart. And as we all know from when we grew up, when we were kids, that people that are scientists, scientists are like the top of the heap. They're so smart, and it's not just smart at science. They're smart at everything. So I started really thinking about it and really considering, deep, fervent considering of what it is that actually radicalized me. So let's think about it. This is a story about a young man named Adam. His name was Adam Robles. And he grew up in a Christian home, but it never really took with him, you know what I mean? And my parents were very good parents. They're still very good parents, and they brought me to youth group. But eventually they said, you don't have to go to youth group anymore. I was probably a senior in high school or whatever. And the minute that I had the choice to leave youth group, I left youth group. I just didn't want any part of it. And it wasn't the same way with my brother and sister. They were younger, but they never actually did leave youth group. My brother went to a Christian college. He was a Christian, throughout the entire time. But for me, it was a little different. And but I came to faith later in life, and I've told that story before. And I got plugged in, man. I got totally plugged in. And I was saved, through, in part, reading Tim Keller's Prodigal God. And so naturally, I lived in New York at the time. Naturally, I went to Tim Keller's church, and I started learning from Tim Keller and associates, Matt Chandler and, a little bit of Mark Driscoll here and there. Although, he's very concerning, Mark Driscoll, very concerning. And, Russell Moore and all these kind of guys, right? And, I grew up listening to people like this, Jim Davis. Now, he wasn't around at the time, at least as far as I knew, but this is the kind of presentation that I would hear regularly.
And the more we understand and appreciate Jesus' sensitivity
He's talking about Charlie Kirk's assassination here.
Toward us, the more sensitivity is going to grow in us toward other people.
Yeah. Sensitivity.
So it's not a gifting issue, it's a gospel issue.
It's a gospel issue, yeah. Yeah.
And this is the only thing I'm going to say in the sermon about the events of this week.
Okay.
Specifically with Charlie Kirk.
Oh, yeah. It's a sensitivity.
This kind of gospel sensitivity could have spared our country a lot of pain this week.
Yeah, sensitivity.
And I don't just mean in the murder, in the things that led up to and even followed.
Yeah.
In the aftermath of that assassination.
Sensitivity.
And the more we understand...
Yeah, the gospel sensitivity, and I used to eat that stuff up, man. It's embarrassing. I used to eat that stuff up. The gospel-centered, sensitivity and the gospel friendships and the gospel intentional fellowship and all of this stuff, it's just everything's gospel. It's gospel athletics, gospel discipline, gospel everything. I used to eat that stuff up, man. I had an hour-long commute to work, on the subway and all that kind of stuff, and I would just eat this stuff up, gorge on this stuff, And I was new, right? And I was new, and I knew that I wasn't a good person, but, before I met the Lord, I was a very selfish person, a very angry person, and very a lot of debauchery over the years, all that kind of stuff. I was a very bad guy, I wasn't a very good guy. And so some of this stuff, I'd hear stuff like this, like gospel sensitivity, gospel friendships, intentional, fervent gospel fellowship, and I would eat it up, but it always felt a little weird because it's like, well, what are you actually talking about? What is it supposed to mean anyway? And they would explain it, but it never really made any much sense. But I was new, right? I figured, I'll get it eventually. I'll understand what they're talking about at some point, right? So I ate it up. I just kept gorging, I didn't know what I was eating, but I was just like, yeah, gospel this, gospel that. Oh, you got gospel donuts here? I'll eat some of those gospel donuts. And so that's the story of me. But here's the trick, though. Here's the trick. I always kind of felt in my bones that there was something that I wasn't really being told, right? I wasn't really being told. And luckily, at the time, I was also a libertarian. Now, you might say that wasn't lucky because most libertarians never escape the vortex of libertarianism. But I was reading a very hardcore libertarian blog called LewRockwell.com, right? LewRockwell.com, very, very extreme. And there was an author on LewRockwell.com that I really liked. I thought he was very good. He had a barbed pen. He had just a way with words that was just very direct and really spoke to me as I really was. Like, I liked knowing what people were telling me. Like, when they said words to me, I could decipher them instantly, like, that's what I liked, and I really didn't like hearing about gospel sensitivity and gospel friendships and gospel planning and all this stuff. Like, I didn't like that because I didn't understand what the heck they were talking about. But I just, like I said, I figured I'd get it eventually, right? But I really liked this guy, Gary North. And so I like Gary North, and one day I found out, I don't even remember how it was I found this out. But one day I found out that Gary North was a Christian. And not just a Christian, he was like a legitimate, I believe that the Son of God is Jesus Christ and that he was crucified on the cross and he rose back from the dead 3 days later, ascended up to the right hand of the Father, and he stands there right now. Like that kind of Christian, like a real Christian. I believe that the earth was created in 6 days, and like actually a Christian. And I was shocked by that because he spoke like no Christian I've ever heard of in my life. And then I started reading more about Gary North, and I started getting into some of his friends, Gary DeMar, Rush Dooney, and then I found Joel McDermott, and I loved Joel McDermott, man. I really liked him because he was young like me. And he spoke in the same kind of way, very direct, and has opened up this whole new world that I had no idea existed. And I met lots of people through that. I remember I went to a street preaching conference, and these guys were like men, man's men, that kind of thing. They were loud, they were direct, but there was so much love too, they cared about the lost. Obviously, they wanted to honor the Lord. But they were awesome. I'll never forget. I was there with a buddy of mine, Charlie. I don't know if you watch my videos, but if you do, Charlie, man, that was a turning point for me. That conference we went to, and we heard, we were singing hymns. At one point during the conference, I'd never heard anything like it. It was just all men singing hymns together. It was like something out of Lord of the Rings. It was just epic, it was awesome. So I kind of knew that there was this whole other side of Christianity that didn't sound like this.
Appreciate Jesus' sensitivity toward us, the more sensitivity.
Yeah, I didn't want any more of that. But yet at the same time, like I understood that like I was still a new Christian, so I didn't want to be led astray too far, and so I stayed in these circles, right? And eventually I thought maybe I'll become a pastor. My pastor at the time had said numerous times that there's a calling on my life, particularly, potentially in ministry and all this kind of stuff. He could just see it, the way I interacted with people, the way I understood things, the way I spoke. And I thought, become a pastor maybe. And so I got an internship with Gospel Coalition, B Squad, Jared C. Wilson. And was still learning, and Jared's one of these guys, right? He's like one of these guys. And so anyway, that all happened, and I'm still learning all this kind of stuff. And then things started getting a little crazy. Back when Trump was getting elected for the first time, and I started to see all kinds of people saying all kinds of terrible things that did not make sense, not only in reality, but according to the theology that I was taught, that I learned. There were these things were contrary to the things I've learned, and what happened was I started speaking against it, and I did it in a way that was not too dissimilar from this guy. If you look at some of my old content, you can see some of the vestiges of this kind of language. Gospel-centered this, and this is a gospel issue, gospel this. And there's, in some way, there's not anything really wrong with that, but you can see how influenced I was by exactly this kind of stuff. And so the lying that I saw people doing isn't what radicalized me. It wouldn't have happened without the lying, like guys like this. Like, let's listen to some of this. This is Mike Kelsey. He's preaching.
So I had to sit with my high school daughter to help her process the ungodly and inhumane reactions of other students around her. Nobody should have seen that video and laughed.
Yeah, oh yeah. Talk about Charlie Kirk too. That's true. That's very true.
But I also had to sit
here we go.
with my high school daughter.
Okay, now this is where you get the emotions going. This guy was trained very well. Let's listen to it.
Help her process some of the things Charlie Kirk said.
Amen. Oh. Some of the things that Charlie Kirk said. What are the things that Charlie Kirk said?
There's some rhetoric from Charlie Kirk that followers of Jesus should firmly denounce. Amen. Listen. Amen. He says some things clearly and unapologetically true from a biblical perspective. And I know there were some clips that were taken out of context. I understand what it's like to have that happen to you. It's probably going to happen today after this message.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We love you. Love you, too. But, y'all, I was getting bombarded by so many questions over the last couple of weeks, and quite frankly, bombarded by so many unsolicited opinions.
Oh, poor me. Poor me. I'm getting out of the video for a minute. Poor me. I get so many unsolicited opinions. Poor me. Pray for your pastors, folks. Pray for your pastors.
So
they have a hard life.
I spent hours just watching long-form debates, interviews, speeches. And just to be frank, in a lot of cases, the context didn't help at all.
Yeah. So let's just get what he's saying here. What he's saying here is, Charlie Kirk, he didn't deserve to die. I mean, we're Christians, right? He didn't deserve to die, obviously. You shouldn't watch him die and laugh. I mean, come on, we're Christians here. But, here's the but. Man, he was pretty evil, though. But he was pretty evil, right? I mean, am I right? I mean, he's derogatory.
In fact, in some cases, I was shocked that so many professing Christians were rationalizing things that were so demeaning and unchristlike.
No,
and
we
not
weren't
just
rationalizing them. See, this is where a lot of people get mixed up, right? We weren't rationalizing them. No, we agree. We actually believe the same thing, right? We're not rationalizing it. Rationalizing kind of implies it's a way to sort of put your opponent on the defensive, right? People do this with me with Joel a lot. Right? How could you rationalize what he said over here? And it's like, well, it's not that I'm rationalizing it. So I agree with that. I actually like what he said. People said this to me with the Brian Sauvé stuff. Oh, how are you gonna rationalize that? Justify what he said? I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying I agree. I mean, total agreement. I would say the same thing.
Rationalizing things he said, but idolizing him as the prototype for a new generation of Christians. And here's my point in all of that.
Where is it?
This is not just Charlie Kirk.
That's right.
This is all of us.
Yeah.
Every single one of us is tempted to talk to or about people in ways that not only dishonor them, but the God who created them in his image.
Amen. Oh yeah, preach it. Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff I would see, and here's what I would do. This is what I would do back in the day. Now I just do whatever I want. But back in the day, I just politely, lovingly, and I would even say that sometimes. Let me just lovingly push back just a little bit. Just a tiny little bit, right? I'm not so sure about that. I mean, how could you really say that? How could you really know? That kind of stuff. That's what I would say. I'd always say it in a way that was non-threatening. Hey, I don't really know about that. Raise the pitch a little bit. I was taught to do that kind of stuff. I was taught to do that. And that's not what radicalized me, hearing guys like Mike Kelsey, right? Because this is opposition. I mean, you disagree with people all the time. But what radicalized me was then guys like this would take my little pushback and tell me that I was acting ungodly. This was inappropriate. How could I say anything contrary to the great Russell Moore? Who am I? You're just a thunder puppy. That's what someone called me, a thunder puppy once. You're just a thunder puppy, how could you say that? This guy's got a track record of ministry and all this kind of stuff. And so what radicalized me, what I realized, was the absolute cowardice of people. Many of the people I looked up to, maybe with the exception of Mark Driscoll, were absolute cowards. Cowards. And the thing is, cowards in two ways, right? Because some of the cowards would tell me behind the scenes, and somehow this was supposed to appease me somehow. I agree with you. But we shouldn't be doing this in public. This should be private conversations. This should keep this one quiet. I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. But you got to remember, these are brothers in the Lord. And so we got to go to them. And we got to say this and say that. You know what? I was still impressionable at the time. So I would go to them. And I bet you can guess what the response was like. Well, the response was very easy to describe because it was no response. I remember at the time I used to be very interested in debating these liberals, right? These liberals. I was very interested in debating the woke church stuff with liberals. I would say it all the time. I'll come on my show. I'll go on your show. It'll be fun. I had two takers. One was a random person on the internet. Whatever. The other was Amin Hudson and K-Dog, J-Dog, I don't know, something like that. I don't know his name. But they were even they were very hesitant. They were like, oh, well, make sure that, you don't edit it in any way and all this kind of stuff, which was, of course, I was fine with. But that was it. Two takers. But I remember, so that's one way to be a coward. I agree with you. The other way to be a coward is you actually don't agree. Right? You actually don't agree, but you want to essentially stop any kind of fighting, right? You're too cowardly to allow the fight to continue, and so you try to shut it down by pretending that there's something ungodly about it and this and that. The cowards, it's guys like this. And there's a legion of guys like this. A legion of guys that look like this, talk like this, and say the kinds of things that he says. That's what radicalized me. When I realized that it's pretty simple. These guys are just cowards. They're just cowards. I watched a video this morning, 6 a.m., with some men at the church. And it was describing some guy who converted as a teenager from Islam to Christianity, and then he starts planting churches in Lebanon, right, in certain areas that are very high concentrations of Muslims and stuff like that. And he said that whenever he goes to try to plant a church, the opposition from the Islamic people, of course it's there, but it's very direct, and he understands it, right? So it's kind of easier to deal with because he knows exactly why they oppose it. He knows, what their goals are, and he kind of knows how to navigate that. But he said what surprised him was opposition from Christians to plant these churches. Oppositions from Christians, and the opposition was something like this. It was like, if you do this, you're gonna rock the boat. You're gonna create a tense situation. Don't do that. You don't want to upset the apple cart. And it instantly hit me that this is just cowardice. This is cowards from Christians. Cowards. They're too afraid of controversy, right? They don't want that. They want to keep things cushy. This guy wants nothing more than to keep things ultra cushy. That's what he wants. And so they'll invent nonsense like gospel civility, gospel sensitivity, gospel, and all that means, when you hear stuff like that, gospel sensitivity, gospel civility, all that means is keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about the controversial stuff. Don't cause controversy. Don't rock the boat. We got to keep it cushy. That's what that is. That's why they oppose Christian nationalism. It's not because they know anything about it. They can't make any arguments from the Bible. They don't even try. They don't even try. But they want to keep it comfortable for them and for everybody else. They want their situation to be as cushy as possible. But they'll tell you out of the other side of their mouth, the Acts of the Apostles, it's just, everywhere they went, there was chaos. They caused the problem with the church today is that nobody's being martyred for the gospel. When I preach, there's no riots. They'll tell you that out of one side of their mouth, but out of the other side of their mouth, what their true belief is we got to keep things comfortable and cushy. And it's that cowardice that I saw that created what you see before you today. And so if you want someone to blame for why I am the way I am, why Joel Webbin is the way he is, why the Eric Kahns of the world, the Brian Sauvays, the Stephen Wolf, why are we like this? Why are you like this? What happened? I think if you ask those kind of men, why are you like this? Oftentimes they're gonna think back and they're gonna think, you know what? I'm like this because I was sick to death of looking around and seeing a bunch of cowards. And I knew that my friends aren't cowards. I'm not a coward. The people in the pews in general, they don't seem that cowardly. So why are the leaders like this? Why are the leaders cowardly? And talking about things like gospel sensitivity, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, but with the way they deploy it just means, don't rock the boat. Charlie Kirk, obviously he didn't deserve to die. We're Christians here, We're pro-life. But, a little more gospel sensitivity, though. It would have spared us a lot of the trouble. I'm here to tell you that the Christian life isn't to spare you a lot of trouble, right? It's not. It's actually not. If you read the book of Acts, they could have spared themselves a lot of trouble by not doing the things that they did, right? They didn't have to rock the boat the way that they did, or maybe they did actually have to. That's the trick, right? They like to praise the people that did it back then, right? They did the stuff back then. If you try to do the same stuff now, that's it. That's it. Michael Foster is experiencing this right now. He's exposing all of the egalitarianism, the female pastors, the female deaconesses in the PCA. This is a stalwart conservative denomination. They've got female pastors. And they'll even tell you on their documents, hey, it's basically like pastors. They're basically pastors. They're not technically ordained, but, they kind of are ordained, installed, same kind of process. And he's exposing that. And what are the cowards doing, right? What are the cowards doing? Well, they're doing the same thing they did to me. Some of them are secretly agreeing, but they don't want to rock the boat. Some of them don't agree, but they don't even want to fight. And instead they want to say, well, we can't do this. This is not a public thing. This is a private thing. And you like all this kind of stuff. Cowards. But at the same time, they'll talk in glowing terms about the egalitarian splits of the past, right? But you do it today, and it's like, they're cowards. I think that's what it boils down to. Like, I've been radicalized by recognizing that you could simply stop being a coward. You could just stop. You don't have to be. And I know that over time, you've been brainwashed by guys like this into thinking that acting in a non-cowardly way is somehow, it's either ungodly or intemperate or all this stuff. And these are, they use those words because those are biblical words. We don't want to be intemperate. We don't want to be like ungodly, right? So like they use them to try to hijack what we've been trained in our minds is moral and ethical. They try to hijack it into turning you into cowards. But you can simply refuse to do it. You could simply refuse to do it. And this is kind of tongue in cheek. I don't actually consider myself too much of a radical, right? But compared to these guys, I'm absolutely a radical. Absolutely. You can be one too. You just have to stop being a coward. The pastor doesn't want to have the uncomfortable conversation. Well, guess what? You can simply decide, I'm going to be okay with it. I'm okay with the uncomfortable conversation. Tough luck. You're having another conversation. This is the thing. Like, I sympathize with this, and so don't hear me denying this, right? Don't hear me denying this. But people will often try to get you to feel bad for your pastor, right? Feel bad. Pray for your pastor, Pray for their job's very hard. Very, very hard. And you know what? It is, right? You should pray for your pastor. You should pray for other people too, but you should pray for your pastor. And then they'll say things like, be easy to shepherd. Be easy to shepherd. And I sympathize with that because I don't want to be hard to shepherd, right? But so often what actually is understood by be easy to shepherd is essentially this. Don't make me have a hard conversation with you. Don't make me have to talk to you about things. Like, don't make me have to do this, like that kind of stuff. Like, that is sick. That is sick, man. I'm sorry. That's the job. You don't want to have these hard conversations with people where you might not see eye to eye. Maybe it's a tertiary issue. Maybe it's a more important issue, but you don't see eye to eye. You don't want to have those conversations. And guess what? You don't want a shepherd. You don't want a shepherd. Because some of the sheep are going to find themselves in a ditch. And if you don't want to pull them out of the ditch, you don't want a shepherd. So I do feel like, pastoring is a hard job, and I sympathize with that. I want to make it as easy as possible to shepherd me, and so I make myself available. I don't hide from the hard conversation, right? I'm ready to have it. I'm ready to have it in a reasonable way, and I'm not going to get all upset. I'm not going to get mad, and when I see things that I don't like that you say from the pulpit or otherwise, I don't fly off the handle. I'm not looking for my next church just because there's something that I don't agree with. I understand that, God's speaking through this guy. And so even if I don't agree with everything, maybe I need to hear this. Maybe I'm wrong. Right? So I do sympathize and I lean towards that, right? Be easy to shepherd, but that can't become, don't rock the boat. Agree with everything I say. Don't say anything else. Don't think anything else. Be a coward. Like me. It can't be that. It can't be that. You don't want to have these conversations. You don't want to have people in your congregation that rock the boat. Then you don't want to shepherd. I'm sorry. I've heard some stories, man. I've heard some stories, and I can't tell them. I can't tell them because I'm not talking out of school. But I've heard some stories, man, about, yeah, anyway. I'm going to move on. But in any case, you want to know what radicalized me? It is the abject cowardice that is everywhere in evangelical public leadership. And there's lots of good pastors out there that are not cowards, right? But they usually don't get the TGC council positions, right? They usually don't get those positions because the minute that they recognize there's someone like that, they blackball them like they blackballed Voddie Baucham. You know what I mean? Voddie Baucham was not a coward. Voddie Baucham was not a coward. And so you know what they do with guys like that? They blackball them. They don't want nothing to do with them until after they pass, and then they pretend how heartbroken they are that, oh, this great man of God, he's gone too soon. It's sad when they go young like that. Save it. Because I could see right through it. And that pisses me off more than anything. To be a coward your entire life, and then someone passes, and then you pretend that you weren't a coward. Oh yeah, we're best friends, and it's heartbroken. I'm just totally heartbroken. As I know you blackballed him in real life. You want to know what radicalized me? It's that. That's right. And I'm not turning back. So I'm just going to get worse from here. It's as simple as that. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.